and we can just kind of get started. This is the ICI Self-Haul Subcommittee for September 15th. Let me just quickly kind of share the agenda, if I can.
I just want to ask unofficially, so to speak, the members that are on, is it okay when we cancel, when the full advisory meeting gets canceled at 4:30, would anybody like to move this meeting to 4:30? Or do we want to always just keep this at the same time? And I just want to see if there's any feelings one way or another.
Greg, I'd prefer to leave it at this time.
Okay, that's enough for me.
Yeah, I think I would too. Yeah.
Yeah, good. All right, just the thought came up. All right, there's the minutes.
Well, no, this is the agenda. So
Yeah, it's hard to see. It's small.
yeah, the agenda we got today is basically, let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger.
Thank you.
Number one, approval of the minutes, but we was going to continue to talk about recovering self-haul waste questionnaire that was sent to disposal facilities. We was going to talk about responsibility of waste, and that comes from the task and the motion that was created at the last meeting, asking the staff to look at other cities and then the liability of certain things and then the public input. So without Marie being here and Todd Braher, I think talking about the self-haul waste questionnaire might be a little bit unfair. So can we move to the responsibility of waste at the beginning of it? And if they show up, then we can kind of go over those questionnaires together with somebody here to kind of talk about it. Is that okay?
That sounds good to me.
So
anybody else? Go ahead.
Okay, so we're okay. So at our last meeting, we was discussing. We were going through the questionnaire, and the question came up about liability of accepting certain hazardous waste or contaminated commodities from self-haul into the disposal site, and what the liability is of that, and also to follow up with federal and state EPA regarding regulations and liability for the same above. If you guys remember, you guys kind of discussed that, and there was a motion made, and it was a little bit jumbled as far as the discussion. So I reached out after and asked if this was what the committee meant. I didn't get a whole lot of feedback. I did get feedback from Sarah Lynn to the rest of the committee that she felt like really that if there was a concern from the liability, maybe it should come from the facilities that have the concern as to what the reason that they have. There wasn't much bite on that either. So this is kind of what I've been working towards, and using this as a motion, reach out to other cities with self-haul facilities to see how they handle liability of inadvertently passing residentially generated contaminated commodities from self-haul facility to the disposal site, and also to follow up with federal, state, EPA regarding regulations and liability for same as above. So what I've done, and I got to be honest with you, it is a difficult thing, number one, to ask another city exactly what they do as far as liability, because everybody kind of looks at you like liability, and there's not a whole lot of things to go by there. So I've really, other than just general stuff, I've not gotten any real answers from other cities. There's lots of other cities that, particularly with newer facilities and facilities in more progressive states with high diversion goals, almost all of them do have self-haul sites on their property. And it is basically, they look at them as more material recovery facilities. It's kind of an all-in-one approach. It's really kind of interesting. If you go out and you kind of Google and look for videos on it, they even have it to where as you come in, they have colored lines on the roadways that take you to a certain type of facility for disposal of household hazardous materials, for common recyclables, for appliances. And they just really broke down the self-haul into a lot more commodities than really what we're talking about. But it's very common in other locations that they do have self-haul facilities, particularly when the facilities are a little bit newer. So I really don't have a whole lot to report as far as feedback from those other cities. As far as the liability of the material, it's also a tough one to come up with because I'm not sure that our motion really does what it needs to do. But I've talked with Pat Stallard, and Pat couldn't be here today. And I'm not going to put words into Pat's mouth. All I'm going to say is from my discussions with Pat, the way I interpret things, and then tell you that we need to wait for Pat to give his legal expertise to it. First off, I want to talk about household hazardous waste because we're talking about self-hauled waste. So that's going to be residentially generated. There is, and Samantha, you'll be happy to hear this, but it's not the whole story here. Solid waste, which are not hazardous waste. And what you see is in this exclusion, a resource recovery facility managing solid waste shall not be deemed to be treating, storing, disposing of, or otherwise managing hazardous waste for the purposes of regulation under this subtitle, if the facility has certain things. So this is a little bit further. Most hazardous waste are regulated under subtitle C under RCRA. They accept that Congress gave this exclusion for household waste. Under this exclusion, waste generated by normal household activities are excluded from the definition of hazardous waste. Specifically, waste covered by the hazardous waste exclusion must satisfy two criteria. The waste must be generated by individuals on the premises of a temporary or permanent residence, and the waste stream must be composed primarily of materials found in waste generated by consumers and their homes. So in other words, even if it comes into a facility, if it's generated from a household or bunkhouse or whatever, it can still have the same characteristics of a hazardous materials, but it's not regulated. So in other words, if a household hazardous materials comes into a transfer station or a self-haul site, it's still not regulated technically. But that doesn't mean that there's not liability to that. So the EPA is basically, they're handled technically not regulated, but should be handled in the same manner as regular hazardous waste if you catch it. So when we start to look at liability, I think you got to keep that in mind. When you look at transfer stations, what I found is the federal regulations, there isn't any federal regulations.
And just start saving it.
Whitney, are you there? Okay. Federal regulations, there aren't any regulations specific to transfer stations. which would include a place like a self-haul site. So there really isn't anything. They kind of, and we kind of discussed this, they kind of defer down to state levels. So I started taking a look at it. State level regulatory programs usually take primacy. This is from the federals in transfer station permitting, although local zoning and land use requirements may apply as well. So you're starting to see the hierarchy of how it works. So really transfer stations, and for the most part, landfills to a certain extent fall under the jurisdiction of RCRA, but under state and local law. They're regulated locally and by the state. In the state of Kentucky, transfer stations are considered what to be registered permit by rule. And I put the quote transfer station beside it because it really doesn't, they really don't name it as a transfer station, but it includes that type of facility. So in section 2 of their registered permit by rule, operating requirements for registered permit by rule facilities, the owner or operator of a facility operating under a registered permit by rule, except provided for in section 3, shall not store, treat, dispose of solid waste not specified in the registration. And the reason I'm kind of going down a path here, facilities can't accept stuff that's not on their permit, okay, not legally. And they are really required to do waste screening. So transfer operators should screen for unacceptable materials before, during, and after customer unload, and should tell customers where they can dispose of waste inappropriate for that transfer station. So anything that comes into a disposal facility, whether it's going to the self-haul site or the landfill site, should be screened and watched for unacceptable materials. So when we start to talk about liability and talking with Pat, and I'm not going to talk for him because this is my take on it. By having a self-haul facility site, a facility is not taking on any more liability than it already has. It already has that liability. So it's not like an increase of liability from taking an unacceptable waste. It's already there. So to me, when you have a situation, you know, the question about liability at that point becomes a little bit of a moot question. And I'm thinking that we're kind of chasing something that we don't need to chase. I think that from a waste that could be brought into that facility, it already shouldn't be coming into there. I don't think if we adopted a regulation to require self-haul separation dumpsters at disposal facilities, that we're hurting them liability-wise. Obviously, if something sneaks in, there'll be some liability to that because you're going to have to get rid of it. But it's incumbent upon them already to be screening for that material. Does it increase it? I don't really think so. Does it lessen it? Absolutely not. The liability is what it is. It's already there. So I don't know that that should be considered a reason why we wouldn't want to create a requirement that self-haul facility, that there be self-haul facilities at disposal sites. So there's kind of, and I know I rambled a lot, but what are people's thoughts on that process? Because I'm finding it very difficult to get answers on this because it's not, to me, I'm not finding anything that raises concern or increased concern out there. So I'd like to hear people's opinions on it, but I would also, if I'm missing something or I need to be looking in another direction, please help me figure out how to do that because I'm not sure what I need to do next.
I think that was good, Pete, and I followed it, I think I did. I think now it's up to, it's like you say, nobody's going to comment specifically on liability from another state to us. I think there's people don't want to talk about certain things. But I think now it's up to either, you mentioned Pat Stallard is going to get back with us, or have any of the companies had time over the last month to get with their legal department? Does anybody want to say if their legal department has anything to add?
Greg, I did talk to, I talked to Jeff Snyder, Pete, with regard to what I want to call the mining of waste for recyclables. And any recycling or any household hazardous waste that comes into the facility does have the exemption from the federal and state. And then that goes for disposal. As long as we try to mine that waste for recoverables. My question is, if we mine that waste for recoverables, does that liability then become more inherent? I'm certainly not a legal expert. And the other issue that our company in Louisville, obviously have is the space available. And we had talked about Scott County. We do have a citizens or a self-haul drop-off area in Scott County. And it's a larger facility, and Pete would be more than happy to take you out there and meet with Jeff Snyder if possible, or Ben Pedigo, and he can explain exactly how we handle material coming into that facility. And maybe we could learn something from that. But
Sure.
my
I would love
particular
that.
personal concern was the mining recycled commodities out of that self-haul material.
Well,
Risk-
I'm sorry, Bruce. Can I ask a question? When you say mining, in my mind, that is when they're dumping the whole load. You've got somebody pulling stuff out of that recoverable out of that load, and the rest of it stays as waste. Is that what I understand your definition of mining it is? Because I think self-haul, having it as a drop-off site for citizens, they are basically self-separating it before it gets to a point where you would want to mine it.
Mining, my definition of mining in this case is providing separate containers for specific goods, like a separate container for wood, separate container for metal, separate container for fiber, those kind of things, and providing that available to the household hazardous waste generator potentially, and then bringing it in and then having to have people there to monitor what they're putting in it is my biggest concern, Pete. And really, we're talking lead-based paint on wood is one of the bigger concerns. HDPE that has not been triple rinsed or double rinsed, it doesn't meet the standards. So I'm talking with Jeff just a few minutes ago. He's going through the issues of what's going on at Scott County, and he will be able to explain to us, and we can go out there and take a tour of exactly what we are doing with our citizens drop-off area. Normally all of that material does go strictly for disposal.
Even the citizen drop-off areas?
Yes. My understanding, Pete. I don't want to talk out of school. I don't want to try to say something I'm not certain of. But in talking to Jeff, we're not, as he termed it, mining material out of that waste stream.
I think mine, and of course, this is I basically looked at the press release for that facility. And my understanding was that it was recovered for, they do have a self-haul drop-off site for waste, but it also is for recovery for recycling. I would like to go get a tour. How far away is Scott County? Anybody have any ideas? Look it up, but I would be.
Can you hear me, Pete?
I can hear you now.
Scott County, like in Scottsburg?
No, it's Scott County. It's over where the Toyota plant is, north of Lexington, Pete. I'm sorry.
So we're not talking about taking a trip out to eastern or western Kentucky. We can.
No. This is an hour and a half drive.
Scott County is like Georgetown area. Sorry, this is Sam. I don't know if you can hear me. It's like Georgetown, north of Georgetown.
So that
So
could
we're
be
not
an hour
talking
and a
about
half.
too far away. Yeah, I'm totally up for a tour of the site. I mean, the fact that it's a brand new transfer station would be something to definitely go take a look at, regardless of the recovery facilities. But I would be very interested in making that trip, and it's something that we can open up to any of the committee here if they would like.
I
Yeah.
would welcome anybody, and I have not even seen it myself, so it would be invaluable for me to go as well.
Yeah, and
Oh, sorry.
go ahead, Samantha.
Sorry. I was just gonna add, I know I was the one who obtained the transfer station permit by rule at my facility. So we manage industrial waste at this facility, and some waste that is hazmat that's going for beneficial reuse. Some of it's non-haz that also goes for beneficial reuse or recycle. And then most of the non-haz goes for disposal. But I know one of the issues that was really hit upon very, very hard. There's a very hard line as far as like the counties that the transfer station is permitted to accept waste from. And I know we we separate and segregate, by county, the disposal facilities that we take to or that we haul waste to, we have to make sure that if it's passing through our transfer station, which we're permitted to accept waste from all continental US counties, but of course, all other, TSDFs are not permitted to accept from all counties. So we have to kind of separate and segregate. So I was just going to say, that was just something that was hit up on so hard during the permitting review process. Just making sure that we were only taking waste to TSDFs if they accepted from that county. So the counties was a big issue.
That is a big issue, and it's a really big issue when it comes to counting waste and where it comes from, where it's generated. Waste are definitely regulated, and the fact that it has to be manifested just to a certain degree, because you do need to be able to report that, and that's what we use for our diversion reports. I will say that once it's a recovered material, that basically it's not you don't have to do that. So recycling facilities don't necessarily have that thing where they can't accept from certain counties. So yeah, it's a huge point for them as far as things. I know our waste reduction center can only accept waste from Jefferson County. So it's just not a very big
Okay,
thing.
yeah, I was wondering. And the other thing that I was going to say about what you found in the regs, as far as household house waste not being regulated, as long as it is coming from, as long as you can prove, on a waste log or tracking of some type that it's coming from an actual household, it does not become regulated. So that is also what I have found in my research. So awesome.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. So is there any other questions as far as the liability part of it? As far as somebody sneaking in and unacceptable materials, or any other concerns about that we haven't heard or still need to address?
Will we still get an overview from Pat, Pete?
Absolutely. Yes. I would not want anybody to trust my interpretation of things, although I generally get it pretty close to right. I know when it comes to things like this, we definitely need to hear from the legal field about it. So yes, and we've talked several times, and he was really sorry that he couldn't make it today. But hopefully, we was supposed to have our advisory committee today. He wouldn't have made that either. But by the next meeting, I'm sure that I hope that he's able to attend and bring us up to date, a little bit more to date from what he's learned, because I've given him the information as well, and I know that he was following up under his legal side of things on what's going on.
Good, thank you.
Is there a way he could update us by email before the next meeting at all, or not?
Well, he can send you, basically, I mean, it's really kind of the same material. I don't know that he has anything, but I tend to think that when you're trying to nail down regulation and stuff, it's always easier to communicate and understand by listening,
Yeah.
and then looking at the regulations and where it goes. It's been quite the trek trying to understand what all is going on, and I just think that, like I said, everything that I've seen, any place new that's coming online or within the certain areas of the country, they all have these self-haul areas for recoverable materials. So I don't see people opening up a whole lot of that stuff if there's regulation that, or concern over liability of what they accept. Now, there may be issues with space, and that's really kind of what I expect as far as locally, because space is of a premium, particularly at some locations. And I can tell you, anybody that's been up to our WRC knows it's on a postage stamp, probably the smallest of the locations. And while we are accepting a whole lot of materials, we're very creative in how we do it. We probably collect most, if not all, of the materials that we're trying to recover, but we would definitely want to do it differently if we could build our own transfer station, for sure.
Okay.
We still don't have a quorum, or do we?
We
I
do
thought we
now
did.
that Matt has joined.
Matt
Oh.
joins. Actually, I'd say let's go back and get the meeting minutes finished out of the way so we don't have to delay that.
Okay, let me jump off to this and go to the minutes.
They're pretty simple minutes, so.
Yeah.
Has everybody had a chance to look at them while he's pulling them up?
I think those are the wrong ones, Pete.
Are they really?
Yep, it says residential C and D.
Yeah.
Don't look at those.
They're too small. I couldn't read them anyway, but
Don't approve that.
I have the minutes up on my thing, and I'm okay with them, but we need everybody else to look. It's the ICI self-haul. Yep.
There you go.
Thanks, Karen.
Make a motion, we approve.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the meeting minutes are approved. Thank you. Now, Pete, you can go back to next topic.
So the only other topic that we had was the questionnaire. And just a reminder of what we did was we created a questionnaire that went to 4 different facilities, which would include Rumpke, Louisville Metro Waste Reduction Center, a Poplar Level Transfer owned by Republic Services, and the Outer Loop Recycling and Disposal Facility. And we asked basically 9 questions and asked them to return and give us some answers on what they thought. The first one, and we kind of started talking about this at the last meeting, what are the benefits and challenges of self-haul customers using the facilities? And what we've done is we haven't gotten them all back yet, but the way that we were doing this the last time was that we would have the individual operator from that location to kind of explain what their answer. So for like Metro Waste Reduction Center, self-haul is a core service and benefit offered to citizens because this is something that citizens can all participate in throughout all Jefferson County. They can drop off things for free. It's a convenient drop-off spot for up to 3 free items. To a certain extent, the benefit for us and as a community is that it prevents some illegal dumping, which would need to be collected anyway. And it makes it to where it's less costly for citizens. What are some of the biggest challenges? People not understanding what we accept, paint, household hazardous materials, which results in unauthorized items sometimes being left when someone's not watching, which is the same thing that we've been talking about. But it's one of those things that even if it wasn't, it's going on, whether we can see it or not. We have to do a good job of screening, and we do screen a lot. But occasionally somebody does get into there. And I'm not going to be able to answer questions, but Poplar Level, it was a reduction of wear and tear on customer vehicles as opposed to going to the landfill. And I think what he's talking about there is that they have a hard surface, whereas at the landfill, you've got a surface that's not always level because you're on a landfill cell. So you're trying to tip close to that landfill cell. Typically more expensive bringing into a transfer station, obviously because it has to be transferred, and lack of having an account set up. Customers would have to pay with cash. So that would be a challenge for self-haul customers, is that they want to have accounts, I think, and they don't really want to accept cash. Whereas the Waste Reduction Center, pretty much only thing that they'll accept is cash. You can get an account, but the system that we have isn't in place yet. At Outer Loop, self-haul provides benefits to the community and allows residents outlet for waste generated by small construction and clean out projects that may not rise to the level of the dumpster. Safety is a major concern. It also requires dedicated staffing to ensure safety protocols are being followed and that all materials being offloaded are permissible. Kind of goes back to, and I think that there's a common theme, at least from the WRC and the landfill, is that you got to do a pretty good job of screening things. And I do think that Outer Loop already has a citizen drop-off area where they've got 4 dumpsters that are there. And again, I don't want to speak for Marie. What materials contained in self-haul waste would you consider to be the low-hanging fruit for recovery? Waste Reduction Center, we already recover metals, tires, electronics, freon-containing devices, yard waste, pallets, batteries. We're working to change process to start including clean, untreated wood and going into the yard waste. Popular level, the lowest hanging fruit is construction and demolition debris. I'm not real sure what they mean by that. Outer Loop Recycling Disposal Facility, they don't believe that there's any low hanging fruit. Most of the value is already gone before it gets to them, before it ever makes it to the landfill. What's left is a blended mix of materials with very little current commodity value. Sorting those materials is both costly and labor intensive and raises significant safety and liability concerns. Again, I think we wouldn't, if we had one of these facilities, I don't see it as being something that it would be incumbent upon the accepting facility to do the separation. It's the customer that would do the separation. What material within your customer's self-haul waste would be the easiest for you to get to a business or nonprofit organization for reuse and recycling? Metal for Waste Reduction Center, and it's easy. We already recover it. It's not hard. We got a place. They back up to it and they drop it in, and we honestly make quite a bit of money for people coming and dropping off their metal instead of putting it in with the pile. We make quite a bit of money every month on that material. Popular level building materials such as unused shingles, paint, etc. So that would be the easiest for them to do. I don't quite understand it. And outer loop was C above, and that was this question here. What material within your customer self-haul waste would be the most challenging for you to get a business or nonprofit organization for reuse or recycling? Metro Reduction Center clean wood, which comes in mixed loads, carpet and carpet padding, and aggregates, as we've just limited on space. So if we could have a separate space for carpet padding and for aggregates, we would probably do it, but we just can't. Popper level brick and block. Although I don't know why brick and block is definitely recoverable with like innovative crushing. They love the stuff. Outer loop, any material brought to the landfills are difficult to place back into the recovery stream. Sorting needs to happen either at the source or at a dedicated processing facility. Again, that's what we're proposing, is a place for them to separate on the site. If the sum of the costs to get the recycled material to the processor plus any payments or tipping fees higher, the same, or lower than your gate rate for junk or garbage. And what we'd had is recycling, it's basically the same. Ferrous metal, it's lower because we get money for it. Ferrous metal, lower because we get money for it. Organics, it's about the same as it is for our landfill. Shingles, it actually cost us less to take care of shingles than it does to take it to the landfill. Electronics is actually higher. We don't do carpet and padding or aggregates. Popper level single stream is NA, and I think that this is something that's basically they're getting money for these, or it's not a cost. Organics, it costs them more. Shingles more, electronics higher, carpet and padding higher, aggregates higher. And I'm assuming that's if you have a disposal facility. Bruce, you could probably answer it better than I. If you have a disposal facility, it's pretty much always going to be cheaper to take it to the disposal facility than to do some of this stuff. Is it, or is it not?
In my case, it's not.
Be cheaper for the metal component that you're discussing, and just because of the value of the metal. And when we look at the economics on the carpet padding and the wood and whatnot, I would imagine, just guessing, it would be cheaper to just put it in the disposal stream.
Yeah, and one thing that we wasn't aware of is we do have a carpet recycler in town. And they will basically take the padding for free. And for the most part, they said that they would take the carpet for free if it's a certain kind. But there would have to be some sorting there. But who knew? And, so did you know that there was a carpet recycler in town, Bruce?
I did not. That's interesting. But my only, I guess, concern then would be if it comes in a mixed load, you're going to have to pull it out. And what's the cost going to be to transport it there? And if we do have a carpet recycler, we really need to promote that so that people take their carpet out and source separate it in their carpet and padding and take it to that facility.
Yeah, and that's what we want. If we wanted to do carpet as a bucket that people can drop their stuff into, I know that there's a lot of carpet that we pick up at the curb. So if there was a place that they can take it, if it cost you $0 to take it to this carpet recycler because they want it so much, and you charge them $10, then actually it could become a income stream. You see what I'm saying?
Where does this carpet recycler get most of its business now?
I think it's getting it from a lot of the carpet installers. They, when they come in and they take the carpet away.
Yeah, so they know, it's like sort of an internal business that knows about it.
With the disposal facility, outer loop, there was an answer of NA on all of them. Are there certain times of the day better suited for your facility to handle self-haul customers? This is something that I found in some of the other cities, was that they wanted residential self-haul customers to come at off-peak times during the day. And that way it improved safety of them operating around some of the heavier trucks coming in from their routes. So that was the purpose of that question. So our facility up there is primarily self-haul, so it's any time of day is okay. Popper Level said late mornings and early afternoons, so I'm assuming that that's their better times. Times would be determined for outer loop. Its times would be determined by the location and materials, because the safety concern of citizens in the self-haul area would have to be relocated. Not here to kind of explain that answer. What should be considered when developing new requirements for your business? Had to have a self-haul customer to separate their loads into individual dumpsters for materials. Metro would be to ensure a robust education campaign to get people to start to separate their loads prior to arrival. I think that works really well with our pop-up drop-offs. And when we started, we had a lot of people come in with their mixed loads. And as we've worked through some of these areas, we're starting to see people coming with their loads separated. So it makes it a whole much easier for them to offload. So if we have a bucket for that kind of material, we want people to know about it before they arrive. So it makes that offloading much quicker and easier. Proper level, safety of the public and space to have separate dumpster setup. So space is an issue. Safety of the public and space to have separate dumpster issues. So space and safety is always there. Safety, cost effectiveness, and existence of an outlet for the materials to being removed, and impact of the overall diversion rate. Self-haul customers represent less than 7% of all the tons delivered, and that number represents all customers without existing accounts and doesn't differentiate between those who dumped at the convenience center and those who went to the working phase. So safety is common. The existence of an outlet for the material is a kind of a new concern, but I think that any kind of regulation that we would create, if we're going to have a bucket there has to be an outlet for it. And I think that it has to be cost effective for us to be able to do that. And as far as, I don't know if it's more, is it worth it with that much of the load? Are we going to get much diversion out of it? I don't know. We'll have to ask Marie how to explain that. If the district decided to create a regulation to divert more self-haul waste from area landfills, what might preclude you from offering additional services? With us, nothing. We're already doing it. With Poplar Level Transfer Station, C number 7, safety in public space and self-haul, a separate location for the dumpsters. For outer loop, if the diverted from the landfill, this question is not applicable. I'm quite sure I understand. Would you be willing to participate as a stakeholder? I think everybody is willing to be a stakeholder. We've had everybody here at the last meeting. So I think that everybody is willing to do it. We're just talking about those 4 sites that accept waste in Jefferson County, municipal solid waste from self-haul customers. So that was it. And I'm not real sure how beneficial that was because of the fact that, number one, I hate reading off of a slide. And I would rather have people explain their answers so that there can be questions and answers to be a much more interactive process. So I'm not sure what anybody got from that, but willing to kind of take questions and what do we need to do with next steps on that questionnaire. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and let the committee members kind of ask questions or give input. Screen frozen.
Yeah. Well, I guess all I could say is what's the next step?
Pete, and this some relates, some doesn't. For us, and it's bad for me on my end. I guess I've done a poor job. Is that there's a lot of people out there that still don't know that I can recycle wood and crating and the type of stuff that we do. So I'm still amazed that people have not. I've done a poor job connecting to people that don't know they have recycling options on our end.
Well, Matt, and going back to your question or comment there, this is what the study found to be in the self-haul waste. Pallets and crates, untreated, unpainted wood, I think is what you're talking about, right?
Yes, sir.
There's plenty of it going into that self-haul stream. Like I said, only a little bit is diverted now. So, part of that is, I agree that people need to know what their options are. And if we created such a regulation that required that there be a bin for woody waste at disposal facilities for people to separate it, you would definitely be the beneficiary of that. But it doesn't mean that you couldn't promote getting it directly from self-haul customers if you would so choose.
Yeah, it's more economical for everybody if it goes direct to one of the sites and you don't have to move it again.
Right, I agree. And honestly, I don't want to lose that as something that we shouldn't promote, which is direct hauling to a facility. And the study didn't capture that. The study didn't capture all the stuff that citizens self-hauled to a compost facility. That wasn't part of it. So if it's already self-separated, we should be promoting that. And do you take the pallets and crates?
Yes, sir. And we're set up for retail too. I mean, Pete Flood could bring me 3 crates and a pallet. You know, I don't have to have it in a typical roll-off truck or something like that. I mean, you can come in as an individual.
Well, that is something that we need to promote. And
Thank
honestly,
I'm sorry, Pete.
yeah,
And
it's,
ask Matt if he screens for overseas pallets and treated pallets.
We screen for treated pallets. I don't care if they're overseas pallets, but I screen for treated woods would be like your railroad ties, your telephone poles, or that type of stuff, or laminated woods.
But aren't some of the pallets coming from overseas treated with pesticides for bugs and whatnot that come into the country?
Yes, but that's a different type of treatment. I can handle that. I can't take the creosote type wood.
Okay.
2 different types of treated. I guess, Bruce, thank you for educating me there. Whenever I say treated, I mean the wood is being treated with some type of anti-rot or something like that, not necessarily for heat treated or something like that.
yeah, and what I would say is that if we have like innovative crushing, if they accept self-generated concrete, we should be pushing people to that anyway. Maybe, you know, by doing it that way, it's better. I honestly reuse first. Got something to reuse it with. That's what we want to push first. But if they really need to dispose of it, take it to a self-haul or a separated place first, and then consider a disposal facility that has self-haul bins for these materials. Any other questions? Well, I would ask the committee if you have enough information to decide whether or not to make a recommendation to the advisory committee that we should move forward with proposing a regulation. Is this, or do we still need to have some of the issues come in and ask these stakeholders to come in and present to us what they can and what they cannot do? I like that idea because we really need the stakeholder involvement. And have them come in and say, this is our facility, this is what we can do and what we can't do. And if we know that, then we can tailor a regulation or choose not to do a regulation based upon their input.
Haven't we already asked them or not? I thought we did.
Well, I think having this questionnaire was our first foray into getting the stakeholder involvement. And, you know, the last question on that was, are you willing to become a stakeholder in that process, which we know that they are. I think that really we need to hear from them a lot more about what they can and cannot do. And you know, Bruce brings up the issue of space. Maybe he can help us better understand his space issue and give us a bit of a presentation or even a tour of their facility so that we can kind of see it firsthand.
I would appreciate the opportunity to have stakeholder involvement prior to trying to promulgate a regulation.
Matt,
Okay.
did you say something and was on mute? No? Okay. Yeah, so is that what the committee wants to do? Maybe make a request directly to each facility to come in, give us a 15, 20-minute presentation on what they can and can't do. And if needed, we can decide to go and visit the site after that presentation.
Tell me again, how many facilities or stakeholders are we talking about?
4.
4? 4?
That's it. Certainly.
I would agree with you, Pete. I think that's the right approach. Have the four stakeholders come in.
Yeah, I think involving them on the front end as much as possible would be beneficial, and it's not too much of a burden with just four of them.
Okay.
Is this something to have them do this at an advisory committee? So it's like
Yeah,
full committee, I guess, and not necessarily for a subcommittee?
I think that's a good point, because if they meet with us, then we'd have to pass it on or meet with them again. So yeah, I think meeting with a full subcommittee sounds good.
So with the request, if I'm understanding the committee right, we want to make a formal request to each of the stakeholders to give us a 15-minute presentation on their facility and what they can and cannot do when it comes to setting up self-haul buckets at their facilities. Just to give us what their thoughts of it is. We need to hear from them directly.
Okay. I'd say 10 to 15 minutes, and then put some type of deadline on it.
I would just want to do maybe 2 of them at a time,
Okay.
because I'm sure that there's going to be questions about things, and we can do that.
All right.
Can the committee kind of make a vote, a motion for the staff to do that, please?
Can we add to the motion Karen's thought that it would be to the advisory committee?
Absolutely.
Couldn't understand all that.
Suggestion was to make sure that the motion included that the presentation would be to the advisory committee and not the subcommittee.
All right. Do any of the stakeholders want to make the motion, or should we try and do it?
I can suggest a motion.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, because I don't know how to word it.
A motion to task staff with inviting the stakeholders for self-haul at disposal facilities to come and give a 10 to 15-minute presentation on what they can and cannot do when trying to site recovery buckets at their facility. And the presentation would go to the advisory committee. So if anybody wants to just say, I'll take that motion on, that's fine.
Anybody have anything to add?
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, I'll make that motion as so worded by Pete to make that specific request to the stakeholders.
I'll second.
Okay. Oh,
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion is carried. Thank you, Pete. Anything else? We're 2 minutes past our time. Any other input from anyone?
that's good. We're at 4:15, 4:17.
If not, does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that.
Okay, Matt made the motion.
I'll second.
Okay. I guess the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
All right.